Hello. Hello. Thank you. I know you're all here for me. Appreciate it. So we were joking in the back that I was looking at my grades from Represent Us and other organizations on democracy reform, and I got straight A's, which made me very, very happy. And we were joking in the back that if the big companies wanted someone to do their bidding, they never would have sent the anonymous Asian man that no one had heard of 12 months ago. Now, this is an uprising of the people. My campaign raised $16.5 million last quarter, all individual donations, no corporate PAC money. So my fans are almost as cheap as Bernie's, but it's just everyday Americans knowing that we can do better for ourselves. Donald Trump's our president in part because many Americans have given up hope that DC is responding to us. And that is not an irrational concern, because the feedback mechanism truly has broken down. Corporate interests and lobbyists have the ear of our legislators, and we're all looking up wondering what happened. There was a headline in one of those satirical publications that said that we should hire our own lobbyist to represent us, because that's the only way anything would get done for us anymore. Money is speaking very, very loudly in our nation's capital, and that's what we have to try and change. I know you're here today because you believe Citizens United was a grievous error that has damaged our democracy very badly, and I couldn't agree more. We need to overturn Citizens United, but then we have to go even further, because the fact is corporate money had its run of DC even before Citizens United. So how do we counter the almighty dollar's influence in our nation's capital? What we do is we unify the people and the money. Right now, 5% or fewer of us donate to political candidates and campaigns. So what we have to do is put money into our hands, democracy dollars that only we can give to candidates and campaigns every single year. 100 democracy dollars, use it or lose it, that you can give to whomever you'd like each calendar year. If we did this, what percentage of Americans would give to candidates and campaigns? Not 100, Americans are lazy. But you'd certainly get it up from 5% to what? 30, 40, 50%? At 50%, we would wash out all lobbyist cash by a factor of 4 to 1. Money talks in this country. The problem is that it's speaking for the companies. We have to have the money speak for the people. And so if you have democracy dollars in our hands, this is actually the way we can restore our government to ourselves and give ourselves the knowledge that now our legislators respond to us because it's in their financial interest to do so. Because if you get 10,000 of us together, that's $1 million for that legislator. And then when the company says, hey, I've got 25, 50,000 for you, they say, I don't want to turn off my 10,000 voters who are giving me $1 million. This is the only way we're going to actually make our government responsive to us again. Thank you very much. Looking forward to taking some questions.
So you have a lot of proposals to reform government, to reform lobbying. One of the proposals that you have out there is you have a plan that would raise the salary of, to be clear, the next president, not yourself,
Yep.
to $4 million.
Yep.
While barring them from accepting outside employment or speaking fees for sort of a decade after they leave office. You do the same with agency heads and cabinet members. You would raise their salary to $1 million. The idea behind this is basically remove the temptation.
And the revolving door, yeah.
But how would you sell a plan that involves giving, these high-ranking government officials a massive raise to an American public that's already, as you said, distrustful and disdainful of Washington?
As your president, about a year from now, I will pledge to, I'll stand up, it's a little awkward. Sorry about this. Now it's like, you've asked me a very serious question, sir. As your president, I will pledge never to take any speaking fees for any personal gain after I leave office forever. Because it's human nature that if I know a company can pay me $250,000 to schmooze their clients for 1 hour, then I might go easier on that company as the president. That happens with every agency regulator. As soon as you stick someone at the head of an agency in DC, a clock starts ticking. And they start thinking, okay, what's my next move after my stint at this agency ends? And you know who's waiting for them? Industry with bags of money. saying, hey, if you go easy on us, we'll hire you and pay you 5 to 10 times what you're making now. So human nature is for that person to go easy on the companies. You know who said this? Sheila Bair, who used to run the FDIC. She said, look, like, you need to make this a one-way street because all of my incentives are to be nice to the companies as soon as I get here. So what I'm proposing is we take Sheila up on her advice and make being president and a regulator a one-way street. Say, if you do this, you cannot work for industry for years afterwards. And if you have a long enough period, like 10 years, you become useless because, you know, like, they're not after you for your know-how. They're after you because you can call people up and lean on them. So for having regulators and a president that you know answer to us, a higher salary is a very, very small price to pay. Because if you're going to say to someone, you can never work for industry again after you take this job, you have to give them enough compensation so it's not like a lifetime of poverty. So what I'm saying, and this is what Sheila said too, we need to ramp up the compensation for top regulators, but then we'll have the confidence that they actually work for us. I'm going to close on a personal story. I went to high school with a guy who went to Capitol Hill with the best of intentions. And he said to me, can't stand lobbyists, would never be one. What is he today? We know how this story ends. And I don't blame him for it because after he did his time on Capitol Hill, it was a big company that wanted to pay him hundreds of thousands of dollars to lobby, and there weren't other opportunities at that level. We have a fundamental incentives problem for both our government and industry, and we have to change it if we're ever going to have regulators that work in the public interest to the point where they'll actually make enemies of the companies and know that they can never work there again.
So President Barack Obama has taken speaking fees since he left office. Do you believe that was a mistake on his part? Do you believe that those speaking fees possibly influenced him when he was president?
All I will say is that I will gladly take no speaking fees forever after I leave office, and that should be the standard we hold presidents to. Because if you can't count on the president to work on behalf of the American people, then it's never going to happen. Cultures and organizations start at the top. If you see the boss doing something, then you look around and be like, I guess it's okay. So if we want to clean up what's happening in Washington, the boss has to set the example. So I'm not going to speak to past behaviors. I will just say what I will do as your president. And if we codify it, then that should be the norm for every president after me.
So that was a yes on Obama. That was a yes on Obama then.
Let's just say, you know, it's human nature is human nature. And there has to be a point in American life where we say enough is enough. You know, it's like there have to be some things that are more important than money. And right now, essentially nothing in American life is more important than money. If you have human lives on one side and money, which wins right now? The money. Democracy, money, the money. Families, the money, the money. Like, there's nothing that's beating money in America today. And that has to change. I'm running for president because I've seen the future that lies ahead for our kids. How many of you all are parents like me? And so if you're a parent, you realize that we're leaving our kids a future that is far less secure and stable than the lives that we have led. And that's because of the numbers. It is just a fact that their future is going to be much more tenuous and uncertain. That's why Trump is our president today. And we have to change that. The only way to change that is having a government that's actually looking out for people and families instead of giant companies and lobbyists.
So today you tweeted that you would like to see 12-year term limits for members of Congress. Why is that, and what do you think that would do?
When we I'll set it up again, sorry about this.
Go ahead.
When we send people to Congress on our behalf, they should be there to do work and then come home. They should not go there and think, ooh, if I can just turn this into a lifetime appointment, I can just like squat here and never have to go back because DC, so much money, the food is so good, like et cetera, et cetera. Like, that's the wrong attitude. So I'm happy to say I have found the secret, the loophole, as to how we can pass term limits in Congress. Go to Congress as your president again a year from now. I will say, hey, you know what would be a great idea? Term limits, because then legislatures would be more dynamic. You'd have different leaders coming in, be more responsive to the people. You wouldn't have this entrenched culture that builds up. So here's what we're going to do. 12-year term limits for every member of Congress, but current lawmakers are exempt. Do you think they'll pass that the next day? Oh yeah, they would. They'd be like, we do this for the American people. Because they'd be grandfathered in, and they'd be like, check this out, I could become like one of the last people standing around here. But then eventually those people lose or age out, and then we end up with a legislature that's actually responsive to us. This is, again, one of the ways we can actually change things in Washington. You have to make it so it's in the zone of agreement where you're not asking people to shoot themselves in the foot to that degree. So what these people are doing is setting restrictions on the people that will come after them. So that's the plan, 12-year term limits. What do y'all think?
So there are some...
And if you can't get something done in 12 years, you should come home.
So there are some states that have term limits in legislatures, states like Virginia, and what some people say end up happening is that you still have an entrenched culture, except it's in the favor of lobbyists, because lawmakers aren't there forever, so they don't know the system. But lobbyists can be there as long as they want, so lobbyists are able to manipulate the system more because legislatures don't have the long history and the know-how. So how do you respond to that?
All you have to do is look at what's happening in DC today. Like, do we really think that the lobbyists are losing because we have so much experience in the legislature that they're outsmarting the lobbyists at every turn? Of course not. We got rid of the Office of Technology Assessment in 1995, 25 years ago. So Congress has literally been getting zero guidance on technology issues for 25 years. You know who tells them about technology issues? The technology companies. So are you really telling me that, like, oh, if you keep Congress people around, they'll actually be able to resist lobbying better? It's not borne out by our experience.
So now I want to turn to audience questions, and we have our first one from Gano Whetstone from Des Moines.
Mr. Yang, I'm a retired teacher and I have a question on voting rights. I believe that the right to vote is something should never be taken away. If elected president, will you commit to ensuring full voting rights for every American citizen, including those who are currently incarcerated, on parole, or have prior felony convictions?
First, Dana, thank you for teaching our kids. Educators make the world go around. As the parent of 2 children myself, I've got one boy who's autistic in a special needs school and the other in public school. So I'm so grateful to the work that teachers do every day. I will 100% commit to full voting rights for all Americans, including those who are incarcerated and have prior felony convictions, with one exception. If they have deprived another American of their right to vote permanently, then they cannot vote themselves. But other than that, even if you're in jail, you should be able to vote. We have to try and help people reintegrate into society. And there are many things we can do to make voting rights easier. I mean, we all know what's happening right now. We're saying to everyone, hey, great news, you can vote. And then we put up all these obstacles along the way. So among the things we should do, 1, make Election Day a national holiday. And number 2, have automatic voter registration when you get your driver's license or any other government documentation. Vote by mail. Just try and make it easier instead of harder. I'm going to propose something. I've already proposed it. I'm not making any news here. But this is something that Americans are just waking up to. We should lower the voting age to 16. And hear me out as to why we should do this. Here are the advantages. The earlier you vote, the more likely you are to vote throughout your life. It would turn every public school into a political hotbed where they actually would be talking about politics junior and senior year, transform the culture. And number 3, if you're 16, you can pay taxes if you work, so you should know where the taxes are going, and you're going to be on this planet longer. The primary counterargument to this is that 16-year-olds are not well informed enough and their brains aren't fully formed enough to be able to vote. To which I would say it's not like we're giving pop quizzes to people who are voting now. You know? We know people are showing up to vote that haven't exactly gone through like copious white papers on candidate positions. So to me, I think we need to trust our young people and empower them and have them feel like they're part of the political process from day one. Another thing I would do to strengthen our democracy that people don't talk enough about, I would support local journalism. Because the fact is it's very hard to vote, particularly on community matters, if you don't have a local paper covering things anymore. And almost 2,000 local newspapers have gone out of business. Why? Because all of their revenue floated up to the internet. And here in America, the market rules all local paper. You don't have a local paper, and democracy suffers. As your president, I would put billions of dollars to work in matching grants to help communities transition to sustainable public-private models of journalism that could be headquartered in public libraries to try and move us to a point where everyone knows what's going on in their community, because you can't have a functioning democracy otherwise.
Thank you. And we have one more question from you, and this one's from Victoria Herring, who is also from Des Moines.
Thank you for being here, Mr. Yang. I'm a retired civil rights lawyer, so I think it's good to be following a teacher who teachers teach me everything, taught me everything. The gerrymandering process is never fair and is always contrary to our democracy. Gerrymandering is one of the many reasons people feel that their vote does not count. It is a tragedy that should be addressed. What will you do to make our voting districts fairly drawn and not subject to gerrymandering?
Thank you, Victoria. Civil rights lawyer, I mean, that's tremendous. That's incredible work. And this is such a pro-democracy group. It's very exciting. So gerrymandering is a massive problem, and someone put it best: voters should be choosing politicians, not politicians choosing voters. So I would back up what Eric Holder and Barack Obama have been working on in terms of anti-gerrymandering provisions that are based around objective criteria for these voting district lines, and not some politician coming in and being like, ooh, if I draw this line this way, then the people that like me will be here and not the people that don't like me. This is, to me, one of the clearest examples of a need to safeguard our democracy. I would, as president, have these objective criteria and say, look, we should be following them instead of letting politicians choose their voting lines. I also want to talk about what we're all here thematically to reverse, which is the Citizens United ruling. So there are a couple of ways you can reverse Citizens United. Number one is a constitutional amendment. Very, very difficult in today's day and age, because you need 2/3 of states, 2/3 of Congress. Really hard. So we all know what the other path is, right? The Supreme Court overturning itself. Now that sounds like it might be very, very difficult, but that's actually the easier path here. Now, I have a couple of major reforms for the Supreme Court. Number one, we need to shift to 18-year terms instead of lifetime appointments. Really, like, if you think about lifetime appointments, they make no sense at all anymore. When they wrote the Constitution, people did not live as long as they do now. And people stepped down for a variety of reasons. They didn't stay on the court until they were at death's door. Really. And so if you look at what we're doing now, literally you're looking at someone, I mean, this is literally the way America works today. It's like they appoint this justice, and then it's like, ooh, this person's in their 50s, like they're gonna be here a while. And then everyone's like, oh, like, ooh. I mean, does it make sense that you're trying to put someone in place that's literally going to be influencing policy like 25, 30 years from now? So we should have 18-year term limits. It would reduce the political firestorm that accompanies these decisions, because if you lose a presidential election, then you know the other party gets, let's call it, 2 justices, and it's not based upon whether an octogenarian is well or unwell. I mean, right now it would be perfectly rational for us all to follow Ruth Bader Ginsburg around and just scrub doorknobs like anything she's going to touch. That would actually be a purely rational move right now. And that's not the way we should be running our country or our legal system. And number two, after you have 18-year term limits in place, which is bipartisan, Republicans should be on board with this because it doesn't hurt either side. And then number two, this is something that is controversial, but it's the only way we're going to overturn Citizens United. There's nothing in the Constitution that says the number of Supreme Court justices. It has been higher than 9, it has been lower than 9. I believe we should increase the number, with the argument being that this too would decrease the politicization of the court. Because if you have a higher number, then if a justice rotates off, then it's not as big a deal. And one byproduct of increasing the number of justices under my administration is that the composition will be such that we will have a realistic chance to overturn Citizens United during my first term. But we have to get real because the other side has been playing very, very, very dirty on this. And if you're in a fight, you can't tie one hand behind your back and complain while they're like stabbing you with the knife. Like, you have to get out and say, okay, I get it. This is a knife fight. Here's my bazooka. And that's how we win.
Great. Okay, we're all set then.
All right, thank you all. February 5th, let's win this thing.